I came home to find her crying over a pregnancy test that I already knew wasn't mine. My name's Mark Daniels, 37 years old, project manager at an engineering firm in Dallas. Married 10 years to Emily, the woman I thought I'd grow old with. For months, she'd been distant, avoiding touch, avoiding me. Said she was just tired. Said it was stress from work. I didn't argue. I just watched. Because something felt off, and when something feels off, I don't react. I observe. It started 6 months earlier. Emily began locking her phone. Started gym sessions at odd hours, new clothes, new perfume, and a nervousness that didn't match the calm woman I'd known for a decade. When I asked, she smiled and said she wanted to take better care of herself. But I'd seen that kind of transformation before, in colleagues, friends, people chasing something outside their marriages. I didn't confront her. I just quietly adapted. I installed a small camera in the garage, aimed at her side of the car. She always left early for yoga. A few weeks later, the camera caught a black Ford truck pulling into our driveway while I was at work. She'd step outside 15 minutes before, makeup already done, pretending to leave for class. I never confronted her. I just recorded. Then, just as suddenly as the distance began, it stopped. She became affectionate again, cooking dinner, asking if I wanted to try for a baby. Her timing couldn't have been worse. We hadn't been intimate in 4 months, and now she wanted to start a family. That's when I knew. She wasn't just trying to fix things, she was trying to cover something. I didn't explode. I didn't accuse. I said, sure, let's talk about it, like any reasonable husband would. Then I went quiet and started planning. Over the next week, I collected everything: security footage, text logs, financial statements. I discovered her gym partner, a man named Kyle Reynolds, construction foreman, divorced, 2 kids from a previous marriage. They met 3 times a week at a cheap hotel near the interstate. Every time I found a new piece of evidence, I stored it in a hidden folder on a drive labeled Taxes 2023. When she finally announced her surprise pregnancy at dinner, she played it like a movie scene. Candlelight, trembling voice, watery eyes. Said she didn't know how it happened, but that it must be a miracle. I smiled. Told her, congratulations, honey. Then I put the DNA test envelope on the table, the one I'd taken from her bathroom trash, tested weeks before. Her face went pale, and in that moment, I realized the silence I'd carried all those months had become my sharpest weapon. She didn't speak for a full minute, just stared at the envelope like it might vanish if she didn't blink. Her hands trembled when she opened it. I'd printed the report in black and white, clean, professional, impossible to argue with. The result, not consistent with the alleged father. She looked up, her lips parted, but no words came. I stayed silent. The sound of the clock ticking behind her was the only thing between us. I didn't yell, didn't curse. I just watched her break, piece by piece, under the weight of her own lies. She whispered that it must be a mistake. Said maybe the lab mixed it up. I didn't respond. She started crying then. Real tears, the kind you can't fake. But tears don't rewrite DNA. Inside, I felt something colder than anger. Calm. Methodical. The same kind of focus I used when solving problems at work. Except this time, the project was her. When she finally managed to ask when I'd done the test, I told her I'd collected it from the trash weeks ago. She'd bought a home pregnancy kit, used it once, and thrown it away. I'd sent the sample to a private lab under my own name. That was the moment I knew she was already pregnant, long before she ever said a word. She tried to deny it again, said she hadn't been with anyone else. But her eyes flicked downward when she said it, and that told me everything. I didn't argue. I didn't need her confession. I already had proof, more than enough. That night, she slept in the guest room. I stayed in our bed, staring at the ceiling, not feeling grief but a strange kind of detachment. Like I was already gone, already past the point of no return. I thought about what came next. Divorce would be easy, but easy wasn't the goal. The goal was precision. I wanted her to understand what betrayal cost. Not in screams or threats, but in silence. The kind of silence that echoes for years. The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, left for work as usual. She texted me twice that day, long messages full of apologies, explanations, and half-truths. I didn't reply. I had a plan to finish first. Because when someone builds their lies so carefully, the quietest thing you can do is let them collapse under their own weight. The morning after the dinner, the house felt different. Not empty, just quieter. The kind of quiet that hums under your skin. Emily moved around softly, like walking on glass. She made breakfast, but neither of us ate. When I left for work, she stood by the window, still in her robe, watching me go. I could feel her fear from the driveway. I spent that day not at the office, but at a lawyer's. A friend of mine, Anthony, had helped me with a property dispute years earlier. I trusted him. I handed him a folder, financial records, copies of her messages, photos, DNA results. He didn't ask questions at first, just skimmed the pages. Then he looked at me and said it was enough to end things cleanly, even reclaim assets if she'd used marital funds on another man. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger. Not yet. I wanted her to live in the waiting. Those days where silence is the loudest punishment of all. That night, she tried to talk again. She stood by the bedroom door, asking if we could go to counseling, start fresh, pretend it never happened. I didn't look up from my laptop. She kept talking until her voice cracked, but I stayed calm, focused on the screen like she wasn't even there. Eventually, she stopped and walked away. That was the shift. The moment she realized the man she'd lied to wasn't going to fight for her or against her. Just act, quietly and decisively. Over the next week, I began to move pieces. Closed our joint accounts, moved my paycheck to a new one, contacted the mortgage company to lock financial changes. Every move left a paper trail. My trail, not hers. She noticed eventually. Her texts changed from apology to panic. She said she didn't want to lose the house, didn't want to throw everything away. But she already had. By Friday, I was done preparing. I had the legal safety net, the financial distance, the proof. What I needed now was precision. A single action that would finish what her choices began, without me saying a single cruel word. I wasn't going to destroy her life. I was going to let the truth do it for me. By the second week, Emily's silence had turned to desperation. She left notes on the kitchen counter, long letters filled with guilt and half-hearted explanations. She wanted to talk, to fix things, but the one thing she never offered was the truth. That told me everything. She wasn't sorry she'd done it. She was sorry she'd been caught. At work, I kept my composure. No one knew what was happening at home. My performance even improved. That's the advantage of silence. It gives you control. No one sees what's coming. Every break, every lunch hour, I used to analyze patterns, create systems. Now I use that same discipline for something else, dismantling a marriage like a clean operation. I discovered more than I expected. The man she'd been seeing, Kyle, wasn't just a fling. He was planning to move. His lease ended in 2 months, and Emily had been looking at rentals in another city. I found the listings in her browser history, tucked between baby clothes and nursery furniture. She'd been ready to disappear. That realization hit harder than the affair itself. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd built an escape plan with someone else's child. That night, I checked the garage footage again. Same truck, same time, 3 nights a week. I watched her leave the house, adjusting her hair in the reflection of her car window, smiling. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in a year. It didn't hurt anymore. It just clarified what needed to happen next. I spent that weekend methodically erasing my presence from our shared life. I backed up all documents, redirected mail, moved my name off utilities. To her, it would look sudden, like I'd vanished overnight. But to me, it was the final stage of the plan, a controlled withdrawal. On Sunday evening, she asked if we could have dinner together, one last try at normalcy. She cooked pasta, lit candles again. Halfway through, she said she'd made an appointment with a doctor, that she wanted me to come. I nodded, said I'd think about it. Inside, I already knew I wouldn't. I wasn't going to be part of the story she was rewriting. The real story was already unfolding, mine, and she wouldn't realize it until it was too late. The night she asked me to come to the doctor's appointment, I didn't answer right away. I just said I'd think about it, and that was enough to keep her hopeful. Hope was useful. It made her predictable. She went to bed early, trying to act calm, pretending we could still be a family. I stayed up, reviewing the timeline one last time. The evidence was solid, airtight. But revenge isn't about proof, it's about timing. The next morning, I called Anthony again. He listened quietly as I explained what I wanted. Full documentation of infidelity, financial misconduct, and proof of deception related to the pregnancy. He asked if I wanted to make it public. I told him not yet. I didn't need a scandal. I needed a conclusion that couldn't be undone. By then, Emily was calling and texting nonstop. She said she wasn't seeing anyone. Said she was confused, scared, didn't know how this happened. The lies came in waves. I didn't answer any of them. Silence is powerful. It makes the guilty fill it with words that betray them. That evening, I stopped by our house to grab the rest of my things. She met me at the door, eyes swollen, wearing one of my old shirts like that would remind me who she used to be. She tried to hand me a sonogram photo, said the doctor confirmed the pregnancy. I looked at it for a moment, then set it on the counter without a word. That small act, refusing to engage, hit her harder than shouting ever could. As I packed, she followed me from room to room, asking if I was really leaving. I told her the truth, that I already had. She cried, grabbed my arm, begged for one more chance. I didn't pull away. I just looked at her and said quietly that actions have consequences, and some things can't be fixed. When I left, she stood on the porch barefoot, shaking, whispering something I couldn't hear. I didn't turn back. I drove away knowing she'd realize soon that I hadn't just walked out of our marriage. I'd walked her straight into a trap she'd built herself. The next phase wouldn't be loud or cruel. It would be surgical, clean, quiet. The kind of ending she'd never see coming until it was already done. The first week after I left, she called every day. At first, the messages were desperate, emotional, full of promises. Then they turned cold, like she was trying to convince herself she didn't care. I saved every one of them. Not for revenge, but for record-keeping. Patterns matter, especially when the truth starts slipping through someone's own words. I moved into a small apartment across town. Simple, quiet, temporary. I spent most nights reviewing what I'd collected, the video clips, the text exchanges, even the financial statements showing the money she'd transferred to cover her secret hotel visits. I wasn't obsessing. I was preparing, because the next step wasn't about emotion, it was about exposure. Not public exposure, not the kind that ruins reputations. I didn't need to humiliate her. I just needed to dismantle her carefully built image until she had nowhere left to hide. Through Anthony, I hired a private investigator. His name was Carter, a retired cop who specialized in domestic cases. He was blunt, efficient, and uninterested in drama. Within days, he confirmed everything I already knew and added more. Kyle wasn't just seeing Emily. He was married. His wife had filed for separation 6 months earlier, citing infidelity with an unnamed woman. Emily wasn't just someone's affair. She was someone's liability. When Carter handed me the photos, I didn't even flinch. I felt a strange satisfaction, not from revenge, but from clarity. Knowing the full picture stripped away whatever sentiment was left. It made the next move simple. Anthony filed the paperwork quietly, petition for divorce, cause, infidelity, and deception. Every detail supported by evidence. But I didn't serve her right away. Instead, I waited. Timing, as always, was everything. 2 weeks later, she texted that she'd scheduled a small dinner with her parents. Said she wanted to talk about the baby. I knew exactly what that meant. She wanted to paint herself as the victim before the truth surfaced. I told her I'd come. I didn't go to confront her. I went to end it. Not with a fight, not with shouting, but with the kind of silence that leaves no room for denial. Because when she tried to use that dinner to rewrite our story, I'd already written the ending. The night of the dinner, I arrived exactly on time. Her parents' house was warm, filled with the kind of polite tension people use to cover fear. Emily opened the door, all smiles, pretending nothing had happened. Her mother hugged me like I was still her son-in-law. Her father shook my hand a little too firmly, the kind of gesture meant to say he still respected me, even if he didn't understand what was really going on. I played along. Calm. Controlled. Dinner started quietly. Emily talked about the pregnancy as if it were some miracle that brought everyone together again. She said she was grateful for my support. I nodded, said nothing. Her parents looked relieved, thinking we were reconciling. That was the point. I wanted them comfortable before the floor dropped out. Halfway through the meal, she said she'd been thinking about names, about building a future, about forgiveness. She looked at me with that same soft expression she used when she wanted to manipulate a situation. I waited for her to finish. Then I reached into my jacket and placed a small folder on the table. Inside was everything. The DNA results. The photos of her with Kyle. The receipts. The messages. All neat, organized, labeled. Her father reached for the folder, started to open it, but Emily stopped him. She already knew. Her face drained of color. Her voice broke when she tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her mother asked what was going on. I told them calmly that Emily was pregnant, but not by me, that I wished them the best, and that this dinner was my way of saying goodbye. No shouting, no accusations, just the truth. Her father looked like someone had pulled the air out of the room. Her mother started to cry. Emily tried to say it wasn't what it looked like, but the evidence was too clear. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and told them all that the papers were already filed, and that she'd be served in the morning. I didn't need to raise my voice. The silence in that dining room did everything for me. As I walked out, she whispered that I'd ruined her life. But the truth was simpler than that. I hadn't ruined anything. I just refused to carry the lie any further. I left their house without looking back. The night air felt clean, colder than before, like the world had finally reset. For the first time in months, my mind was silent. No noise, no questions, no rehearsed conversations. Just quiet. That kind of quiet that comes after you've done exactly what needed to be done. I didn't go home. I drove to a motel on the edge of town and checked in under a different name. Not because I had to hide, but because I wanted distance. The next morning, I turned off my phone, ordered black coffee, and watched the sun rise over the highway. The relief wasn't joy, it was clarity. By noon, Anthony called. He said the papers had been served. Emily had tried to stall, saying she needed time, that she was still processing. But time wasn't hers to control anymore. The evidence had been filed with the court, sealed, undeniable. Anthony said she'd likely lose her claim to the house, maybe even owe restitution if the financial trail showed misuse of marital funds. I thanked him, told him to proceed quietly. No headlines, no spectacle, just resolution. Later that day, Carter sent one last report. Kyle had skipped town. His construction company filed for bankruptcy. His wife had reopened the separation case. Emily's future had collapsed overnight. The life she'd built on lies had finally turned against her. And I didn't have to lift a finger. That evening, she showed up outside my apartment. I didn't let her in. She stood there crying, begging, saying she'd made mistakes, that she'd do anything to fix it. I listened through the door, not to the words, but to the rhythm of her voice. It wasn't remorse, it was survival. People like her don't apologize because they feel guilt. They apologize because they've run out of exits. I told her through the closed door that she'd get a fair settlement, but that was all. She said she couldn't live like this, that I'd taken everything from her. She was wrong. I hadn't taken anything. I'd simply stopped giving her the protection she no longer deserved. When her footsteps faded down the hallway, I finally exhaled. The noise was gone. The war was over. But the quiet, that was mine now. 2 weeks passed without a single word between us. No calls, no messages. Just silence. The legal process moved forward exactly as planned. My attorney handled everything while I focused on rebuilding structure, something predictable, steady, and mine. I went back to work full-time, spent my evenings running, eating clean, sleeping through the night for the first time in months. Freedom didn't come with excitement. It came with stillness. Then one morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten, no return address. I knew the handwriting immediately. I almost didn't open it. Inside were 6 pages of explanations, apologies, and a final line that said she was leaving town. She didn't say where. She only wrote that she hoped someday I'd remember her as the woman I married, not the one who betrayed me. I folded the letter once and set it in the drawer of my desk. Not out of sentiment, out of habit. I like records, even of endings. Anthony called later that week to say the divorce was finalized. Everything had gone through quietly, efficiently. The house was mine, the accounts clean. No contest, no appeals. Emily had signed everything. He asked if I felt any satisfaction. I told him satisfaction wasn't the word. Completion was closer. That night, I drove to the old house one last time. The rooms were empty now, stripped of noise and memories. I stood in the doorway of our old bedroom, staring at the faint marks where picture frames used to hang. It didn't hurt anymore. It just felt finished. Before leaving, I set the keys on the counter with a note for the realtor. Outside, the air was cool, the streets quiet. I didn't look back when I closed the door. I moved again a month later, to a smaller place near the lake. It wasn't about hiding, it was about peace. the kind that doesn't depend on anyone else. Some evenings, I'd walk by the water and think about how people talk about closure like it's an explosion, a final moment of catharsis. They're wrong. Closure is the sound of nothing. It's the steady rhythm of breathing in silence and realizing you don't need answers anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was just free, and in that freedom, quieter than I'd ever been. A year later, I barely recognized the man I'd been. The chaos, the suspicion, the constant weight of betrayal. It had all dissolved into something quieter. Life had structure again. Mornings started with coffee by the lake. Evenings ended with the hum of crickets and nothing else. My phone didn't buzz with guilt or lies, only reminders, appointments, and work. Simplicity had become my revenge. Then, one afternoon, as I was leaving the hardware store, I saw her. Emily, standing near the parking lot, holding a toddler's hand. She looked older, thinner, like someone who'd lived through her own storm. Our eyes met for only a second. She didn't smile. Neither did I. The child tugged her arm, asking something I couldn't hear. She turned away, lifted the kid into her car seat, and drove off. There was no satisfaction in seeing her like that, just a strange sense of distance, like watching a chapter you'd already finished being replayed by someone else. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or pity, just closure. Real, unshakable closure. That evening, I sat on my porch, the sky dimming into amber. I thought about everything that had happened, the silence, the planning, the execution. Every move I'd made had been deliberate, precise, but it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about taking back control, the kind of control that doesn't shout or demand attention, but simply exists, steady and unbreakable. People often say revenge is loud, that it needs fire, confrontation, spectacle. They're wrong. The most devastating revenge is quiet. It's the moment the other person realizes you're no longer part of the narrative they built, that your life has moved on without them. I rebuilt everything from the ground up. New job, new friends, a cabin by the water where I could breathe without the echo of someone else's lies in the walls. Sometimes the past still flickered through my mind, like static from a signal long lost, but it didn't haunt me anymore. I learned that peace isn't the absence of betrayal. It's what comes after, the decision to stop feeding it, stop remembering it, and start living. Some men fight back loud. I didn't have to. I just let the truth speak for me. And in the end, that silence said everything.